Hey everyone, I'm Liz Peterson, and welcome back to another one of my Pipedrive training videos. Today I'm super excited to be sharing a long form video with you that's going to cover everything you need to know to get started with Pipedrive the right way. First, we're going to cover what Pipedrive is and how it can help your business. Then we're going to cover the basics of how to customize Pipedrive for your business. This is going to include everything from customizing your pipeline stages, how to create custom detail fields and activity types, as well as lost reasons. And then finally, of course, we'll cover how to actually use Pipedrive so that by the end of this video, you can be using Pipedrive for your business today. As always, if you like this content and you want to be notified when the next video drops, please subscribe to the channel. And if you have any questions, leave a comment. I really love hearing from you. With that, let's dive in. So what is Pipedrive? Pipedrive is a CRM, or Customer Relationship Management Platform. It's a program that helps you stay on top of your sales interactions and customer conversations. I have loads of clients come to me and say, Liz, I don't have a CRM. I just have a spreadsheet where we keep track of the last interaction we had with someone and the next interaction we should have. And I tell them they shouldn't beat themselves up because that's actually about 80% of what a CRM is. With Pipedrive, you'll create a deal to represent that sales opportunity. And within that deal, you can keep track of all interactions across email, text messages, and phone calls. You can keep notes on previous conversations. And maybe most importantly, you can schedule future activities for yourself or even for someone else on your team. So, for example, you don't forget to follow up when you said you would. Now, Pipedrive is a web application, so you don't need to download anything to get started. But I do want to call out that Pipedrive also has an iPhone and Android application, which you can use on your phone or a tablet. So if you're a home services professional frequently out in the field, I highly encourage you to download the Pipedrive app so that you can add photos, create voice memos, or add notes to your deals while you're on site. Now, little bit about me. I've been using Pipedrive since 2018. At that time, I was working for a startup that provided landscaping services, built fences, and installed driveways for homeowners. I built that company's sales system in Pipedrive, and with it, they scaled their sales team from 2 to over 30 people. And now they're operating in cities across the US. In 2020, I started consulting on Pipedrive and Zapier, and I've been using Pipedrive for my own business ever since. And it's a total lifesaver. It's intuitive and it gives me a single source of truth on all sales conversation, which can sometimes go on for months or even years. So, if you're looking for a tool to help you keep track of the hundreds of sales conversations you may have in a given month, the dozens of bids you send out, and even the projects that you've won and now you need to get scheduled, you've come to the right place. Depending on where you are in your business's growth, if you don't have the time or resources to set Pipedrive up on your own, book a call with me using the link below. We help dozens of companies start using Pipedrive every year, and we would be happy to help. But if you don't have the budget to pay for support, no problem. Just keep watching and I'm going to cover everything you need to know. If you haven't already, the first thing that you need to do is sign up for a Pipedrive trial. If you use our partner link, which I've put in the description below, you'll get an extended 30-day free trial. I've also added that link as a pinned comment below so you can easily access it. So I'm going to go ahead and complete this new account setup for you. So you'll be asked some questions about yourself, your company, your goals, and then you will be able to create the account. And once it's done with the setup process, it will take you to an onboarding flow automatically. But I'm going to walk you through everything you need to do for setup. So I want you to exit this onboarding flow and go to your deals. You may see some sample data in your pipeline, and if you do, that's great. If your pipeline is empty, you should see the option to try with sample data. Go ahead and click that button and then confirm that you want to try with sample data. That's going to pop deal cards into your pipeline that you can follow along with during the setup. Today we're going to cover everything that you need to know to get your Pipedrive from looking something like this to looking more like this. And if you want a downloadable guide with specific recommendations for your business, click the link in the description below, or I also have it pinned in a comment, and we'll email you that guide within minutes, and then you can continue along with the video and that guide in tow. Once your account is set up and your sample data is in, I want you to go to Deals, which is the money symbol over here on the left-hand side. This is your deals pipeline view. We're going to make a lot of customizations here, but before diving into that, I want to orient you on what you're looking at. In the deals pipeline, each of these little white cards represents a sales opportunity. Now, I'm going to click into one of these cards to show you a little bit more about it. On the left-hand side in this white section, you have your summary section, which is the most important details about this opportunity. Then you have custom detail fields, which we'll go into more. And then I want to keep scrolling here. Most importantly, I want to call out that a deal can be connected to a person and also an organization, but it's optional that it's connected to both. So a lot of people ask me, do I have to use organizations? No, absolutely not. If you are strictly a B2C company, you may never use organizations. If you're B2B and B2C, you may only use organizations for some deals, and that's okay too. But the key thing I want you to understand is that you need to be using deals alongside at least either a person or an organization. I see a lot of companies that try to just work out of the contact database, which is basically just using the spreadsheet that they'd previously been using in Pipedrive. The deals gives you another layer for your sales tracking because you can move deal through different stages. You can mark deals as won or lost. And if you have another opportunity with Benjamin Leon later on, you can create another deal for that same contact so that you can track sales progress over time without needing to have it all just within the contact, which doesn't have any of that sales level data. The first thing that we're going to do today is customize your pipeline stages. So that's the column headers that you're seeing here. Now, I want to call out that ultimately you can have more than one pipeline, but a really common mistake that I see companies make is setting up way too many pipelines from the get-go. For example, trying to set up a pipeline for each of their individual sales reps or for each of their individual products or services. You don't need that many pipelines. When do you need more than one pipeline? For this, I'm going to pull up my other sample account. So you'll need to have more than one pipeline when the way that you sell for that given service is fundamentally different than the way you sell another service. Think unique sales process is a unique pipeline. So for example here, I have 4 different pipelines in this account, but we're going to focus on these first 2, which are both for a kitchen and bath remodel company. So their first pipeline here is their remodel pipeline. And the way this sales process works is they get a new lead and they reach out to them trying to schedule a showroom consultation where people can come in and see the different options they have available. Then once they have the showroom consultation, then they schedule an in-home consultation where they actually go out to that customer's home and do measurements there. Then they present the budget numbers or present the quote based on the information they've collected so far. They have selections where the customer will come back to their showroom to pick out the different options that they actually want to have installed. And then they have a signing appointment at their office. Then they have another pipeline, which is just for retail sales. So people who want to install themselves or something like that. They're not looking for the full renovation. For that, the process is much simpler. A lead comes in and says, hey, I want to buy cabinets from you, for example. They come into the showroom and they pick out what they want to buy. A proposal is sent and the proposal is signed. Once the proposal is signed, the order is placed and it becomes kind of post-sale. But you can see it's a much different process for making a retail sale versus making a full remodel sale. And so for those 2 different services, they do need 2 different pipelines. But for your setup today, I'm going to encourage you to just start with one pipeline. So start with whatever you consider to be your core or majority service and set up the other pipelines that you may need in the coming weeks or months once you get comfortable with that first pipeline. To edit your stage names, you're going to click the pencil icon up here. And for your stage names, you want to use action-oriented names. And I really like these to be in the past tense. The goal is that the stage names are really intuitive for your current or future sales team to know when a deal should be in a particular stage. For today's setup, I'm going to be configuring Pipedrive for a hypothetical window and gutter cleaning company. Their sales process typically goes something like this. They get a new inquiry and they first things first are reaching out to schedule a quote appointment. So I'm going to name my first stage scheduling appointment. That's the first thing that they need to be doing. Once they get that scheduled, I want the deal to move into the quote appointment scheduled stage. It makes it very clear that when we get a lead, we are scheduling the appointment, and as soon as we have that appointment scheduled, they move into the next stage. So I will do quote appointment scheduled here. Once the quote appointment happens, it's really quick moving them from quote appointment to quote sent. From here, people say they'll go into stages called something like negotiating or in progress or following up, which is really non-specific. So for this company, they often have to do revisions, and revisions are both time intensive and they slow the process down because the owner has to approve any revisions. Once it's in quote sent, that's great. We can win a deal in quote sent if revisions aren't needed. But if revisions are needed, we want a stage that's actually for revisions requested, because we want to know how long a deal sits in that stage, again, because the owner is kind of a bottleneck, and we want to know how often revisions are requested versus not. Then we need that those revisions are sent, so we'll do revised quote sent. And then here, I don't need this stage, so I can just click delete here. And then if I did need another stage, I click the plus button here and I can add one, and it'll just get added to the end there, or you can add some in the middle here as well. I'm going to save these changes and we'll see the pipeline update here. So all of those stage names have changed. I also want to call out that I don't have a quote signed stage here. And that's because for this sales process, once a quote is signed, then the deal is going to be won. As soon as we have a signed quote, that contract is completed, then we go into scheduling, like that sale is made. So we don't need a signed quote stage in this particular pipeline. For sake of example here, I'm going to set up another pipeline, and this is going to be a bad example. So one of the things that we'll often see is stage names like this. Right, we have new, quote appointment, quoting, following up, and all of these don't have enough specificity about when a deal should be in that stage. So is it new all the way through the quote appointment? Is it the quote appointment, once the quote appointment happens, it gets moved into this stage? Or is it once it's scheduled? How long are we quoting? Like if we've sent the quote, should it be in quoting, or is it when we're preparing the quote? So again, that's why I really like the past tense action-oriented stage names, because it should make it really clear for anyone who joins your sales team down the road that if you have the quote appointment scheduled, the deal should be in the quote appointment scheduled stage. If they have requested revisions, the deal should be in the revisions requested stage. One of the things that people really love about Pipedrive is the visual appeal. So if you want to kind of take that up a notch, another thing that you can do throughout Pipedrive is add emojis into things like stage names, activities, so on and so forth. So I'm going to do that, for example, here, just so you can see it. I'm going to rename this pipeline, which I didn't do at the beginning. And then I'm going to just paste in some emojis here. So I'm going to click save so you can see what those changes look like in practice. And if you want more details on stage name recommendations, I do have another video where I go into more detail on that topic. So that is linked below if you would like to check it out. But either way, I recommend pausing this video here and taking a few minutes to think through what you want your stage names to be, and go ahead and enter those into your first pipeline. Then once you have those set, come back to the video, hit play, and we'll move into probability and deal routing. Next up, we have probability. So probability is the percent chance you have of winning a deal once it reaches a certain stage of your process. So usually it is the lowest number on the left-hand side when someone just reaches out, and it is the highest number once you get to your quote sent or bid sent, contract sent, those sorts of stages. What I recommend to start is don't overthink it. This is very easy to change later on, and in fact, once you've been using Pipedrive for a while, there's a report you can use to get your actual win percentages by stage that the deal has reached, to update this to give you actuals, which will then give you a weighted value of the overall deals in your pipeline. But to start, just put in something that seems roughly right. So we win about 20% of the deals once we do a quote appointment, and then once we send the quote, same thing. If they asked for revisions, it actually jumps up a lot. So once we send a quote and send a revised quote, then we actually win 1 out of every 2 of those deals. So I'm going to go with those. Now, deal rotting, this rotting in days, this is one of my favorite features in Pipedrive for new users. It's a really easy way to escalate opportunities that might be kind of going a little bit stale just with the click of a button. When you turn the rotting feature on, you say a deal in the scheduling appointment stage rots in 2 days. What you are saying is, if a deal has been sitting in this stage for 2 days and nothing has happened on the deal, so an email hasn't been sent or received, we haven't added any notes, we haven't made any phone calls, if this deal has not been touched in 2 days, I want it to rot. And that's going to just turn that deal card pink to give your sales team kind of a visual indicator that, like, hey, this deal might be getting stale. It might be one that we need to reach out to without having to be as heavy-handed as, having a pre-programmed activity or something like that. And you don't have to have rotting turned on in every stage. So for the quote appointment scheduled, I don't actually want rotting there, because as soon as we've scheduled an appointment, that appointment might be in 2 weeks, it might be in 2 days, but I don't need to do any outreach in that time period. So I don't need it to rot at all in the quote appointment scheduled stage. But then once we send the quote, I want to make sure we're following up every few days. So I want the rot time to be 3 days here. Once the deal moves into revisions, the owner needs to approve that revision ASAP, right? So I'm going to make that 1 day. And then once we get to revised quote sent, we also want to be following up every 3 days. And I'm going to go ahead and save those changes. Now, here in this pipeline, I want to show you how the probability feature works. So we had the probability turned on right here by stage. And you see here, this deal value is $30,000, but the weighted value is $6,000, or 20% of that, because we said we have a 20% chance of winning deals that are in the quote appointment scheduled stage. Then for quote sent, we said same 20%. So if this is a $10,000 value and the weighted average is $2,000, again, based on that 20%, whereas if I moved it over here, then the weighted average goes up to $5,000. That is also shown here in the stage headers. And then up here at the top, you can see full pipeline values. So your total value, and then over here, that is your weighted value based on those probabilities that you have set. The deal rot is much harder to see because I just made an update here. So I'm going to show you that in my other pipeline. So you see how some of these deal cards are pink, and then there's this kind of red circle on it. What that means is this deal is rotting, and it's been rotting for this amount of time. So again, it helps you prioritize work when you're looking at a bunch of deals and maybe don't know who needs to be reached out to next. It's kind of a way to triage what is maybe most important once you hopefully get through your activities, which we'll talk about as well. Now, I briefly want to go over these 3 icons over here in the left-hand side. Your default is your pipeline view, what I'm looking at now. You can also look at your opportunities in a list view, and you can see this is going to show you all pipelines by default, or you can select just a specific pipeline, And then you can also apply filters and customize the columns of data that you're seeing in this view. So especially for people who may have been using spreadsheets before coming to Pipedrive, this view is going to maybe be a little bit more natural. And then just to show you here, if you wanted to, for example, add in the stage name, you can also sort A to Z, Z to A on any column of data here. Then finally, I'm just going to mention it, there is also a forecast view. To use the forecast view, every deal has to have a value and also has to have an expected close date so that it can be scheduled out to whenever that opportunity is expected to close. So for example here, if I add a value, and here if I add an expected close date, and then go back to my forecast view, now you see that that deal is scheduled out to close in July, and we have the overall value and then the weighted value based on the probability in the particular stage where that deal sits now. But you may be wondering, Liz, how do I actually add a deal to Pipedrive? How do I do it? You see this big green button up here. That is definitely one way, but I'm going to go back to our setup account here. You can also add a deal by clicking the plus button on any column, and then you can also do it up here, clicking deal, or using this hotkey, just hitting the button D. That's also going to take you to the add deal window. You can also add deals via import, or you can connect your web forms, things like that, to Pipedrive directly. I'm not going to go into that today, though I will just call out the import feature is here, so you can import data there if needed. And I do have another video that goes into details on how to do a data import. So if you want to access that, I also have it linked below. So I'm going to just add a deal here saying, hey, someone reached out to me and they want to get a quote appointment on the calendar. So this person is James Anthony. And you see how that little loading icon popped up there? That's searching your existing database. So if they've reached out to me before, Pipedrive would tell me, hey, you have another James Anthony in your database. Do you want to use that James Anthony, or do you want to create a new one? In this case, I'm going to say this is a brand new person. I can enter their phone and their email here. If this is a B2B opportunity, I could add the organization where, or the company where James Anthony works, but in this case, it's just a residential property. Down here, I can add any other details if I need, and then I just click save. And boom, I've got my new deal, James Anthony, in the scheduling appointment stage of this pipeline. Now, this add deal form can be customized, and I really like it when it is customized because it'll only show you the fields that you actually need to complete when you are adding a new opportunity to the particular stage or pipeline that you are adding it to. But that's going to be in a follow-up video because it is not a core need when you're first getting started. You can just add the person, it'll auto default to the title. You can put in the value if you would like, expected close date as well, click save, and then you'll have that deal created. Once you have a deal, what can you actually do with it? I'm going to show you by clicking into this new opportunity that we just added. So here in the middle in this gray section, you have kind of your contact timeline. Here up at the top, you can add an activity. So I'll just create a task assigned to myself, due today, boom, I've created a task for myself. You can also add a note. And that's going to pop down to the bottom here as something that happened today. And also, if it's something really important, I can pin it so it always kind of stays top under this focus area. Emails that are received can be logged on the deal using this little feature here, which I'll go into in more detail in the follow-up video. You can also add files, and I love this if you're using the mobile app. When you are on site, you can take photos and upload them directly to the deal so they are there for the rest of eternity. You can also create proposals or contracts using Pipedrive's Smart Documents feature here, schedule meetings using Pipedrive Scheduler, or if you integrate your calling tool, you can have calls and text messages logged automatically on the deal as well. I want to bring your attention over to the left-hand side here. I'd mentioned earlier that you can capture custom details about your sales opportunities. And up there with Deal Rot, this is one of my favorite parts of Pipedrive. So to add custom fields, you'll click here and add a custom field. Up here, you'll name it, and then I want to first talk a little bit about the different field types. So a really common pitfall that I see is people just using a text field for every little detail that they want to capture. And text fields are really not great for data capture or reporting. So you want to try to think about choosing as specific of a detail field as you can for the given data that you are trying to capture. For example, I know that I want to capture the appointment date. So I'm going to add the appointment date as a field name. And then under the field type, I want this to be a date field. It's always a point in time. Then over on the right-hand side, if I want this to be in that add deal window, so when I click to add a new deal, I might have this field available to enter data into right then and there, then I want to check this box. So in this case, I do, because I might be scheduling the quote appointment when I go to put this into Pipedrive. And then these quality rules. I love these quality rules. Quality rules allow you to say a certain field is required in a particular stage. I think of it as a really easy way to teach your sales team what information needs to be captured at what time. For example, if I try to move a deal into the quote appointment scheduled stage, I have to have a quote appointment date. Like if it's scheduled, I have to have a date in that field, right? That makes sense. So I'm gonna just update this to the quote appointment date. And then just as a best practice, I like to always have the field be important, the stage before in which it is required. And I'll show you why in just a moment. So I'm gonna click save here, and then I'm gonna just refresh this so that that takes effect. Now you have this quote appointment date field floating up here in the top section under please fill. So basically, if we haven't yet input a quote appointment date when the deal is in the scheduling appointment stage, that field's going to be floating up here. And then if I put a date in, it pops down to the bottom, the normal section under the detail fields. But then again, if it is empty, it'll be floating up here at the top. And now, because I have made that field required, when I go to move the deal into the next stage, it won't let me until I say when that quote appointment is. So if I go ahead and put a date in here and clicked save, then it would move the deal forward. If I click close, it won't move it forward. And I can also do that out in the pipeline view. So let's say that I scheduled this appointment. If I try to drag and drop it into the quote appointment scheduled stage, it says, hey, cool, you got it scheduled. When is that quote appointment? If I add the date and save it, then it'll take that stage change effect. But if I don't, it'll stay in the scheduling appointment because I have to have that date in. Then I'm going to create a few more detail fields here. So now I go customize fields and add a custom field. I want a project address. If it's B2C, it's usually going to be James Anthony's address, but maybe James owns a few different properties. So I don't want to just store it at the person level. I need to store it on the deal level. Which property are we going to be servicing? So this I can use an address field so that it will be a Google verified address, again, rather than just a text field. I want that in this add deal window, and then I'm going to make it required by the time we have the quote appointment. Otherwise, we wouldn't know where we're going. And then I want to make it important in the stage before. I also want to add a source input. I want to know where I'm getting my opportunities from. Are they referrals? Are they from Facebook? Are they from other advertising? So this, I'm going to make it a single option field, which means I can select one of the options from the list. And I'm going to put in some options here. And then I want that required as soon as this deal is added. And one other field I'm going to add is a referrer field. So if they are referred, I want to know who referred them because I want to be able to thank them. And here, instead of using a text field, I'm going to use a person field. So what this field is going to do is it's going to pull from my contact database in Pipedrive. So for example, James Anthony, he is now a contact in Pipedrive. If he refers someone later, I can start typing James Anthony into this field, and then it would capture that he referred this given person and link it all through, again, that contact database. For this one, I'm going to add a description so people know this doesn't always have to be completed. I'm not going to make it on the add deal window. I'm not going to make it required because this is only going to be completed if the source option is referral. Save, and then when I click done, now I have these 4 detail fields here. The referrer, it's got this little I symbol. If I hover over, it gives me that help text of when that field is supposed to be completed. Again, if you want custom recommendations of stages as well as detail fields for your business, I have that download available below through the link, but also so you can see a few other examples here. We have the kitchen and bath company in the remodel pipeline. You see I've got some Zillow details, appointment details, and these detail fields here. In the retail sales pipeline, I have far fewer detail fields because I don't need them. Then if I go back out here, if we're doing, for example, maybe a solar installation company, we've still got Zillow details, but then we've got solar panels and utility details, and then maybe some calculation fields. But as with everything today, my recommendation is don't go crazy. Start with a few fields. You can always add more detail fields later as you get comfortable with the first few. Now, before I set you off to create your detail fields, I want to go over one other type of detail field that just lives in a different place. So this, add labels. I get questions all the time. Liz, what should I use labels for? What the label is just a multiple option field. And it's color coded. So you have an additional benefit of in labels, you'll get a little color on the deal card out in this pipeline view when you are using labels. But a really common thing I see people do is they try to cram 10 different types of information into labels because they want it all color coordinated. But if you do something like have a bunch of labels for different source options, and then you have a bunch of labels for different types of properties, it gets very confusing for people of what they're supposed to put in the label field. So I recommend keeping it simple. Think about what is most important for you to be able to see in that pipeline view about your deals and use that for your labels. So what I'm going to do for this company is I want to know if the service is for gutter cleaning, and I'll make that yellow, or if the service is for window cleaning. And I don't need another option that's window and gutter cleaning because if it's both, because it is a multiple option field, I can select both of those services. So now, because I've added those 2 labels here, I can see them out here on that pipeline view, and I know that this quote is ultimately going to be for both the gutter cleaning and window cleaning service. Now that you know how to create custom detail fields, take 5 or 10 minutes and add a few to your Pipedrive account. When you're ready, come back, press play, and I'll teach you all about how to start working in Pipedrive. When you're working in Pipedrive, you can do a bunch of different things within the deal. You can add an activity, add a note, you can complete an activity, and then you'll get a pop-up saying, hey, what do you want to do next? You got to schedule a next activity. You can update detail fields, and you can also do things like add the deal value or update the deal labels or expected close date. You can also update the deal stage, which you can also do back out in the pipeline view by, again, dragging and dropping. And then finally, you can also mark a deal as won or lost. So I'm going to take a second to talk about the difference between your stages, which are your columns here, and your statuses, which are open. Those are all of your white cards that you're seeing in your pipeline now. They can also be lost, or they can be won. There's also a concept of archived, but I don't usually recommend using it when you're getting started. So your open deals are the ones that you're actively working on, that you're actively trying to drive towards closing the deal, making the sale, all of those good things. So those, again, are going to show up by default in your pipeline here. Then I'll go here to this revised quote. A deal can be marked as won. So if I click the one button here, if I need a follow-up activity, I can create it or I can click cancel. But then I've got this deal won. One thing that oftentimes kind of confuses and scares people is that deal seemingly drops out of the view. But I want to call out that it only drops out of this view because your default view is all open deals. Those are the deals that Pipedrive assumes you need to be working on. So those are the ones they keep top of mind for you. But you can always apply a filter to see your won deals, and you can also always search for a deal. So if I search for Benjamin, I can see this one deal, and if I need to, for whatever reason, I could always reopen it by clicking this button here. But what's most important about this is by keeping the deal in the revised quote sent stage and updating the status to won instead of, for example, using a stage to capture won, I actually have a bunch more data that I'm capturing about that opportunity because I know how many days it was in the revised quote sent stage, when it got won, or if I didn't have to send a quote revision, it could be won in the quote sent stage. And then I'm able to capture that, hey, this is a deal that we closed only needing to go through half of our sales process, and we actually won it off of the original quote that we sent. So it's really important that you use statuses to capture when a deal is won or lost, and stages to bring them through the different aspects of your process. So that brings me to marking a deal as lost and lost reasons. Again, people are sometimes hesitant to mark a deal as lost. They're like, hey, I can always chase it down. Absolutely, for sure. But you can also always reopen a deal. So let's say that James Anthony says, hey, you know what? Actually, it's not in the budget. We're not going to do the window and gutter cleaning this year, but maybe we will next year. You can mark this deal as lost, and I'm going to show you how to configure custom lost reasons rather than just using the text box that's otherwise available here. So to set up your custom lost reasons, you're going to go to Company Settings, and then here, click the lost reason button, and then you can enter a lost reason here. And as far as recommended lost reasons, I want you to keep them actionable. If you put every lost reason under the sun, you're not going to ever do anything when you know that one deal was lost for this reason and another for that reason. What you want is to have kind of categories of why deals were lost, so that maybe if you change your services or change your pricing or add a new offering in the future, you may be able to look at deals that you lost for a particular reason and send out a group email to all of those customers saying, hey, we now offer that service, or something like that. So just some really standard ones, no response, we got ghosted. Again, if you wanted to add an emoji in here, you could. Then I'm going to do pricing or price too high. Another one, went with a competitor. And then another one I really like, especially with B2C, is the project on hold. Maybe the person says, maybe in the future, but not now, especially if it's like a big renovation or construction project. That means like they haven't done this project yet. So maybe they'll decide to do it next year or in 2 years. So I'm going to save that one as well. Then I recommend turning the free form reasons option off. That means you won't get text answers. You're forcing your team to select from this predefined list of reasons, and you can always come in and add more if needed. So now back over here, if I refresh, I'm going to now have those lost reasons available. So if I mark this as lost and say project on hold, I could add a note. And or I could even create an activity to reach back out in 6 months if I wanted. Back on my pipeline view now, I just have that one sad open deal. But again, if I want to see all of my lost deals, I just need to apply that filter. Or if needed, I can also always search for a deal. And if I need to, I can reopen it, but reopening deals means you lose the fact that that deal was lost for a time. So if this was lost for 6 months and then James says, hey, yeah, now I may be interested, let's get a quote appointment scheduled. If I just reopen this deal, from a metrics perspective, it's going to look like this deal has been open for 6 months and it took us 8 months to close it. And that may be the way that you want to do it for your business. But another way to do it would be to add a new deal for James. Select him from that list and save it here. I've now got some required fields, so I'm going to need to add those. And what I like about this is now we have this fresh deal that's going to go through the sales process again, beginning to end. And also, if I go to my contact, who is James, so you see up here, I'm now on the person. Previously, I was on the deal, but now if I go here, I'm going to be on the person, James Anthony. And here on the person, on the left-hand side here, I can see deal history across multiple deals. And I also have all of the history across multiple deals of different things that have happened with this person. So again, don't be afraid to mark deals as lost. Don't be afraid to mark deals as won. And if you need to, you can always reopen a deal. And you can also always add a new deal for the same contact if they come back around later. The final customization and best practice I want to share with you today has to do with activities. Activities are really at the heart of Pipedrive because it was designed by salespeople for salespeople, with the underlying philosophy being that winning more deals was just about having the right touch point at the right time. And activities is how you make sure you are doing this. So first, we're going to go into a couple of customizations. If you go into any deal and then you click on activity here, this little gear icon at the bottom will take you to your activities settings. So here you can customize your activity types, and you don't have to do this, but what's really nice about customizing your activity types is ultimately you can do reporting on the volume of the different types of interactions that you're having or that it takes to close a deal. More simply, maybe you just want to know how many on-site visits you have in a given week or a given month, or that a particular sales rep does in a given week or a given month. If you have a specific activity type tied to that event, then ultimately you'll be able to do reporting on those activities. So I'm going to create a few activity types here. You can choose an icon and then you name it. So I'm going to do a quote appointment. And then I'm also going to add a proposal sent, and then maybe a proposal follow-up. And those are important, so I'll make them a bell. Now, some of these default activity types you may not need. For example, meetings, maybe you don't need deadline and lunches. So you can turn those off by using the toggles there. Now you have this set of activities. So if you go back to your deals, and here if I click on a deal, if I want to create a new activity, I now have this set of icons. And if I just click the camera icon, it's going to default to a quote appointment, and then I can add notes here if I want. And you can either have this scheduled out in the future, so that would be keeping it to do, or you can mark it as done right when you're creating the activity if you're doing this more as a logging exercise. So I'm going to click save there, and now you can see that that quote appointment is down here in the timeline. It happened in the past, and I've got all the notes in this yellow section as well. But the way I really encourage you to use activities is to make sure that every deal always has a next planned activity. So out in the pipeline view, this icon on the right-hand side, that's going to tell you what's happening as far as the future planned activities on that given deal. So a gray circle means that there's an activity due in the future. A green circle means there's an activity due today. Red means there is an overdue activity. And then the triangle, this warning symbol, this means there is no future planned activity. And the reason it's a warning symbol is because that's kind of Pipedrive's way of telling you that this deal may be at risk. If you do not have a next planned activity and that person doesn't reply to your email or reply to your text message or respond to the proposal that you sent out, the odds are you're going to forget to follow up with them or forget to follow up with them at the right time. So whenever you see a yellow triangle, make sure you add an activity for when you want to follow up. So this scheduling appointment, I want to make sure that I am calling every couple of days. So I want to call to try to schedule that appointment tomorrow if I haven't heard back from them. If by tomorrow we already have that appointment scheduled, no problem. I can just mark the activity as done and have a future one for when that quote appointment actually takes place. But having something scheduled in the future ensures that I'm not going to forget about the opportunity. So to give you a little bit more of a visual example of this, I'm going to go back over to my other Pipedrive here. So here you can see there's a lot of green circles. Those again are activities due today, and then the gray ones due in the future, and then red, those are overdue. And if I click into this, I can see who this activity is assigned to. So this is assigned to Michael, this one's assigned to Julia, but this is not where I recommend to go to look for your activities. As you're working in Pipedrive, what I always recommend is you go to your activities. So this is going to give you a list view of everything that is scheduled for you. You can use this gear icon to customize the view, and I'll go into that in more detail in a future video. And then you can use these toggles on the right-hand side to look at just activities that are due today, just at activities that are overdue, and then also just at activities that are assigned to you. That's the biggest problem with trying to find activities in the pipeline. If there are deals assigned to lots of different users, and maybe one user has to do a particular thing on every deal, whereas there's kind of the owner managing the overall process for other deals, this is a really hard place to go and know what you have to do in a really quick way. So I always recommend go to activities that are due today, that are overdue, that are assigned to you. Make sure you're working through that list. You just click on the deal here and it'll get a little pop out. You can follow up with whatever you need to do. Click the circle here or here to mark it as done. And you can really quickly run through any activities that are assigned to you. And then for the rest of the day, have Pipedrive up, and as you need, add new deals, drag and drop deals into new stages, and all of those other things that we've talked about today. Congrats! You've made it to the end of part 1 of my Pipedrive setup guide. So your account is ready to use. Now all you need to do is use it. Here's what I recommend. When you're at your computer, have Pipedrive pulled up in a separate window or tab so that you can easily navigate to Pipedrive whenever a sales conversation comes up. Maybe you get a text message from a new prospect. Pop up Pipedrive and create a new person and deal for that contact. Maybe later you get an email about a quote you recently sent out. The person says they're going on vacation for a couple of weeks but will review the quote once they're back. Go to Pipedrive, find the deal, and create an activity for yourself due in 3 weeks to check in on how their vacation went and see if they have any questions about their quote. Maybe you have a quote appointment later this week. That's awesome. Using the Pipedrive app, take notes throughout your visit, and if it'll be helpful, add photos to the deal. The more you use Pipedrive, the quicker you'll see the impact it's going to have on your business. Now, I know this was a lot of information, but when you're ready, come back and watch part 2 of this setup guide. In that video, I cover Pipedrive's email sync feature, which can notify you when someone opens or clicks a link in one of your emails, whether you sent that email yesterday or 6 months ago. I also cover how you can use email templates to follow up with your prospects quickly and consistently. And I'll teach you how to create custom field groups, make deal card customizations, configure your activities view, use the leads inbox, and optimize your interface preferences, all of which make Pipedrive even easier to use. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up below, and I'll see you in the next one.